The resolution puts forward goals for the city. The goals are for us to have our electric utility, GRU, to be 100% renewable energy by 2045.
That includes how we produce the electricity that we use to power our homes and our businesses, but also looking at other things like our fleet, how we can better encourage the use of electric vehicles using renewable energy for our regular residents, and moving towards things like a zero waste policy. So you put all those things together, we're talking about a much smaller carbon footprint for our community and a much greater utilization of renewable resources.
My name is Patrick Gilmartin and I'm a student at the University of Florida. I'm making this video about the Ready for 100 resolution because I love Gainesville. I grew up here and I wanted to see what the community was doing to combat different environmental issues. I wanted to learn more about this specific resolution as well as what I can do to help. I also wanted to inform the public and see if I could motivate others to help as well. This community is precious and it needs all the help it can get.
So in the little town of Gainesville, well, city technically, yeah, makes me feel more comfortable to live here and know that my local government is taking strides to combat climate change and ensure the well-being of its citizens and the environment around them. Whether they decide to actually put certain actions into place, that's going to be a whole nother story. You know, the finite description of the resolution, how they take that into real life application for our city.
So the city of Gainesville has a non-binding resolution to hit 100% by 2045. So then a non-binding resolution is sort of akin to a New Year's resolution, you know, and we all know how well those kind of work out. Because the problem is with just the language, like a resolution, it sounds resolute. You know, it sounds like we're going to do this. But you know, every year, January 1st, you say, I'm going to get a six-pack. And it's, what are we in, November? And I've still got, you know, a very pizza kind of stomach going on. You need a sort of self-accountability mechanism. Sometimes having, you know, sometimes these agreements between countries sort of helps because they can keep an eye on one another. But when it's just the city itself, like, what are you gonna, like, are the citizens gonna hold the city officials accountable? Are you gonna say, okay, if you don't follow a strict timeline to show continuous development in green energy, are you gonna resign? Or do you lose your job because you didn't stick to what you were saying you were gonna do? Are the city managers gonna hold themselves accountable? I mean, you can't just say, I'm gonna try with something like this.
The other things are really looking at cost savings. As renewable energy prices are going down, they're cheaper than some of the fossil fuels. So right now solar is actually cheaper than coal. And we're also seeing for electric vehicles, we're doing a pilot program now where we are testing six electric vehicles to see what are the reduction in maintenance costs, because there's a big reduction in maintenance costs for electric vehicles. There's no running parts. Also seeing a reduction in fuel costs as well. So I think one of the biggest things that will come from this is actually in the long run we'll actually see a cost savings.
Well, I think about it in terms of a three-legged stool. A current use of electricity here in the community, then energy efficiency, then biomass, and then solar energy. And so energy efficiency should get us about a third of the way there, and biomass about a third, and solar about a third.
We're already actually quite far ahead. 27% of our energy already is produced by renewable energy, way above the state average of 3%. We also have put in goals to move all of our vehicles in our fleet to, including our bus system, to electric by or to renewable or electric services, our fuel by 2045.
I and the general manager of the utility have started some discussions with the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, who helps communities. The biggest city they're helping is Los Angeles right now, move towards their Ready for 100 goal. But they work with smaller communities, and they're very interested in Gainesville, not only because of the commitments we've already made, but our size and the fact that we own and control our own utility. And so I think they'll be a great partner in helping us develop the finer points of the plan. Of course, greater deployment of solar energy is going to be a big part of that. And then we need to reduce consumption. A big part of this is demand side management. Unless we get a handle on that, we can't just build more and more power generation and expect to reach our goals.
This resolution emphasizes equity. It's important to note how low-income households are affected by environmental downfalls. Bloomberg News reported that Gainesville has the 5th largest income gap in the country. It may not be obvious how this resolution would have any impact on economic equality, but environmentalism plays a very important role on the subject.
I have gone backpacking. I went backpacking for a year, and I was doing work trade on agricultural farms, like organic farms, permaculture, all that good stuff. And I saw in the Amazon River that it was easier to buy a Coca-Cola than it was to buy water. I've seen the pollution of the name brands from here in the United States in rivers, thousands of miles away from the place that I live, that I grew up in. And I see the way that it affects communities abroad. The globalization of these corporations is affecting little indigenous villages, So environmental rights is a human rights issue, because if you pollute the water upstream, it's going to affect everyone downstream. So right now there's like this proposed phosphate mine on the New River in between Bradford County and Union County. So if this mine got approved and they were able to work on this project, we are downstream from New River. It would affect our water here too. And that is a human rights issue. It tends to affect also people who are more in poverty, who have less access to resources. So environmental justice is a human rights issue. And if people don't see that, then they're not looking at the bigger picture, and they're just focused on kind of like, again, their little niche bubble and thinking about how to make themselves feel more comfortable and not thinking about the world at large.
Yeah, so the equity portion is part of the resolution that was passed. I think it's incredibly important that we look at not only the economics and the environmental effects of it, but also equity on who's seeing the effect of it. We have seen for a long time that poorer sections of cities and poorer areas are ones that are more affected by environment. Those are the ones that see more flooding. Those are the ones that, and honestly, they put power plants next to, or they put dumps next to, but they can't speak loud enough. So I think it's important that we have this equity portion into making sure that we're not only, when we're looking at prices and looking like that it's not just what works best for a certain segment, making sure that it works for everyone and everyone can be included. We're not leaving people behind just because they may not be able to afford it right now.
GRU doesn't provide electricity to the University of Florida main campus, but does provide electricity to the new medical center, Sorority Row, and a few other locations outside of the main campus. Duke Energy provides electricity for UF's main campus. I wanted to look into UF's usage because although GRU doesn't provide for their main campus, they are still part of Gainesville. Does that make sense?
The university is one of 16 large public research institutions that co-signed a commitment. I think it was back in 2006 maybe, to go to 100% renewable. But they are a customer of Duke Energy. They're also a customer of ours. We built a combined cycle plant that powers their health center there. We'd love to be closer partners with the university, and we've had some very good discussions with them as to what that might look like. Ultimately, the university could meet its renewable goals with about 400 acres of solar. That's what it would take for them to close that gap. And I think that GRU can really come up with some creative ideas as to how we do that. But we also think we can partner with them in other areas. I mean, they have a lot of older buildings, and we can go and look at how they can reduce their consumption through energy efficiency upgrades. We think there's the same opportunity there with our school system, and the fact that the infrastructure tax just got passed will really offer the Alachua County Schools a great opportunity to modernize their school infrastructure and reduce consumption.
Yeah, I think environmentalism and all of the things surrounding the topic, people ignore it because it's so scary, and we can't wrap our minds to the fact that we will soon be affected by these issues. Human rights issues, if you're not a particularly one of the marginalized people who's being affected by the systematic oppression in place, you have more of a kind of like a leeway to feel obligated to help because it's not you. But when you look at environmental issues, you realize that you have an impact on the environment, and it's really hard for people to look at themselves and see, I need to change my behavior.
I think that it really goes to, why are so many things wrong in our country? Because our public education system's lacking. We don't get, taught these things in classrooms about how to, lessen our environmental footprint so that we're not, continuing to do everyday actions that little by little amount to this problem that we're in.
As I delved deeper into the subject, I started thinking about what Gainesville residents can do to try to achieve the goals of the initiative. It didn't sit right with me to just stand on the sideline while the UAB and GRU and the city worked hard to implement the changes of the resolution. Both me and my peers wanted to help influence positive change. So what can we do?
It's a kind of a two-pronged approach. One of the things is the use of electricity. Many countries, developed countries, countries we compete with, use electricity much more efficiently than the United States does. And so I think we should first spur ourselves on to be a more efficient electrical community, so to speak. And so along those lines, decreasing our electric use on a per capita basis. Now that doesn't mean suffering. A lot of people connotate that with I've got to suffer to save energy. No, I want us to be more efficient and still get the same service out of it. So changing out your lights, not using things when you don't have to, things of that nature. Small steps at first, but they can carry a big cloud.
There are also plenty of nonprofits here in Gainesville that are looking for support. The Community Weatherization Coalition is a nonprofit that trains local people here in the community to become energy coaches and then do energy tune-ups on low-income households. This not only helps save energy, but also helps save the resident money. There's also We Are Neutral, which focuses on offsetting businesses and households to become carbon neutral. And once the house or business becomes carbon neutral, they become a neutral neighbor. I talked with Grace Ebner, who is the accounts manager over at We Are Neutral, a little bit about how the process works.
So the first step to becoming carbon neutral with We Are Neutral, it starts with a consultation. We get to know the individual, the group, the business, the interested party in becoming carbon neutral to get a feel of what's important for their carbon footprint. Each carbon footprint is unique, so understanding the major components of a carbon footprint and what's really individualistic to that carbon footprint is important. And then we can calculate that based on utility consumption and other data. Then supporting our carbon offsets by purchasing our locally created offsets allows them to become carbon neutral. And then they can take it a step further by participating in the creation of our meaningful carbon offsets.
So are these small businesses mostly, or just individual households that are
All kinds of people. We have a bunch of businesses, residents who take responsibility for their impact as well. Events, conferences, music festivals, everything has a carbon footprint, and We Are Neutral has years of experience calculating different footprints and also educating people on the translation of what that carbon footprint means to them and how it portrays their lifestyle and habits. There's definitely like a rabbit hole that you can go down with calculating a carbon footprint. So we say something that's important is just understanding the bigger picture so you can focus on the major components of the carbon footprint, looking at those components rather than all the little toe prints that people can kind of get caught up on.
Cool. Sweet.
Am I optimistic about the future? Depends on the day almost. You know, certain pieces of news make you just shake your head and say, "What are we doing?" Other things are incredibly optimistic. I look back in our history, and we as a country seem to always take our time making that critical decision, almost to the point when it's too late, and then we act like all the fires in hell are after us, and we move with a speed that's astounding.
As I said in the beginning of the video, I wanted to make a call to action. There are many different resources and organizations here in Gainesville to support. I already mentioned the Community Weatherization Coalition and We Are Neutral. There's also the Swanee St. John Sierra Club who helped draft the resolution. And there's also the Ready for 100 Coalition, made up of local leaders around the community from many different diverse backgrounds. It's made up of the NAACP Environmental and Climate Justice Committee. It's made up of the Alachua County League of Women Voters, the Alachua County Labor Coalition, the Citizens Climate Lobby in Gainesville. It's made up of the Women's March Gainesville, made up of the United Church of Gainesville Racial Justice Task Force, and made up of the Earth Care Committee of the Westminster Presbyterian Church. There's a lot of work to be done, but I have faith in this community, and I'm optimistic about the future.